what the Trump administration seems to be trying here is ratchet up the pressure sort of in the threat of military intervention, plus putting a great deal more pressure on China to do more. But basically, it's the same approach as we've seen, maybe with just a little bit more in the way of Chinese cooperation being expected.
Well, do you expect to see more Chinese cooperation? I mean, we certainly seem to be going that way. And if that's the case, is it just going to be further sanctions, or do you think that there is something more?
Well, it's really difficult to know exactly what's in the minds of the Chinese leadership. Although, reading the state-owned media, some of the statements coming out of the People's Daily, Global Times, they do seem to be a lot more sharply worded and insisting that North Korea not take further provocative steps, especially not another nuclear weapons test. There's many more cards that the Chinese can play, certainly economically, to bring even greater pressure to bear. For example, just cutting off energy shipments, forbidding its banks from helping North Korea engage with the international commerce system. There's more, certainly, that China could do, and I think we should expect to see some actions.
But realistically, do they have any calls? I mean, the Koreans maybe have the confidence that China cannot afford to let them fail as a state, feel they need to keep them supported in the medium term. So you might get a squeeze from China, but realistically, do they have any viable threats?
Well, that would be, I think you're right, that at the end of the day, the Chinese do not want to see North Korea collapse in some chaotic way, whether that's through war or just simply squeezing the regime to a point where there's an uprising. They don't want to see that. They want the North Korean regime to change, I would think, to transform, but to do it sort of on Chinese terms and in a way that China would ultimately have the biggest voice or say of an outside power as to how that peninsula gets reunified and how that gets related to the United States. So collapse is certainly not something they want because then they don't know how they could control it going forward. But there's still more, I think, squeezing that can be done, and I think we're going to see it coming out of the Chinese, but they're going to have to walk that line very carefully.
Overall, what do you make of Mike Pence's visit to the Asian region, Bates? Because, of course, it has come very early on in the presidency, in Donald Trump's presidency, obviously is needed, given the concerns about the US-Asia relationship.
Well, I think we should take it as a good sign. It's let's say, the third or fourth major visit of a senior administration official to the region. I think it is right to sort of see it as a reassurance tour to remind especially close allies like Japan, like South Korea, and of course, the Vice President will be also going to Australia, to remind them that the United States remains committed to the region, that it does intend to ramp up its presence, not just militarily, and that perhaps much of what was said on the campaign trail about the alliances, about American presence in Asia, is going to be walked back. Indeed, we've seen much of it walked back. The biggest problem, in my mind, is on day one, the president withdrew the United States from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which I think in a single stroke was probably one of the most disastrous decisions he could have taken for American presence in the region. So there's a lot of work to be done to shore up American allied confidence in the United States and its leadership and presence in the region, and that's what the Vice President's trying to do, I think.